In this video, I'm gonna give you some DJI Pocket 3 filmmaking picks that will completely transform the way you film using your DJI Pocket 3. I'm gonna show you everything from the basics all the way up to more advanced techniques, so that by the end of this video, you'll have all the knowledge that you need to confidently go out and shoot professional looking videos using your DJI Pocket 3. This is the ultimate crash course in filmmaking with the DJI Pocket 3. Now let's start with 10 essential tips when it comes to filming with the DJI Pocket 3, as well as a beginner versus pro sequence to show you how much of a difference it makes to use different camera angles. So let's start with the basics. Why getting the right camera angle is so important. Getting the right camera angle will help you convey the right emotions, draw your viewers' attention to important details, and influence how your audience perceives what it is that you're trying to tell them in your video. Knowing how to use the correct camera angles and why will make a huge difference in the quality of your videos. So let's start with the wide shots. This is traditionally the shot that you use for establishing your scene, commonly known as establishing shot. The 15mm wide-angle lens adapter is great to introduce a scene, landscapes, or panoramic views. This camera angle usually sets the scene, giving viewers a sense of the environment and context of where the action is taking place or is going to take place. It's the perfect shot for introducing an occasion, which makes it ideal for travel videos or for opening a scene. A slightly tighter alternative is the wide shot, and if you don't have access to a 50mm lens adapter, you just have to move further back, and hopefully you have enough space to get a wider looking shot. And when it comes to vlogging and social media content creation, whether vertical or horizontal, this is a great lens to have because it shows more of where you are and the background behind you. If you pair this with a selfie stick, you can get some pretty amazing looking shots. You just need to be aware that because the lens has an f2 aperture, there will be a bit of blurred background behind you or your subject, but not as much as with a 20mm, because this is the lens and type of shot that will give you the least amount of blurred background when vlogging. The next one up is the mid shot, and this is probably one of the most common shots you'll ever use, and it's the one that is best suited to the standard 20mm lens on the Pocket 3. It frames the subject from the waist up, and it helps focus the viewer's attention on what the subject is doing, giving you a more intimate shot than a wide angle. You can zoom in up to 40mm with the Pocket 3, and this makes it easy to get a wide range of mid shots, which is perfect for interviews or casual conversations on camera. If you do a lot of vlogging, a way to cheat a wide shot using the 20mm lens on the Pocket 3 is to mount it on a selfie stick and extend it out. And because the camera is so lightweight, you're not gonna feel the weight like you do when you use a mirrorless camera. A lot of the times when I do my vlogs walking and talking, this is exactly what I do, especially if I need to record something quickly. Maybe I'm in a public place and I don't want to be drawing attention to myself by having to spend too much time adding lenses and accessories. I'm giving away a free ebook that covers every aspect of content creation and how to make better videos. So all you need to do is leave a comment below with the word ebook, and I will send you a direct link so you can download it, and hopefully it's gonna help you create better videos moving forward. The next shot is the close-up, and close-ups are all about telling the audience, look at this that I'm showing you, it's important. It could be a small detail, a reaction, an expression on an actor's face. You are getting right up close to a subject and sending a message to the viewer, and that is, pay attention, this is important. If you're doing an interview or talking to camera, this is the kind of shot that will help you highlight certain emotions or reactions because this is so up close and personal. With a 20mm lens zoomed in all the way up to 40mm, you can actually get really nice close-ups without losing too much quality. And there are ways that you can then enhance this in post to make them look amazing. Close-up shots are really powerful because they draw the viewer's attention to the character or the subject that you're filming, whether it's a person or an object, and your audience will know, even at a subconscious level, that these shots are highlighting something that is really important or relevant to the story that you're telling. And if you punch in a bit more, you get extreme close-up, and traditionally on larger interchangeable lenses, this would be done with a 75 or 85mm, even with 100mm. The Pocket 3 doesn't have anywhere near those focal lengths, so all you can do is to physically bring the camera as close as you can to what it is that you're filming. This shot usually focuses on a specific part of the subject, like the eyes or the hands, or if you're filming an object, a specific feature or detail. These are usually great as your cutaway shots because it gives the viewer important details that are relevant to the story that you can't really convey using a wider lens. The first of the unusual camera angles is the high angle or high shot, and this is when you put the camera above the subject looking down. High angle shots are great for when you want to make the subject appear smaller, weaker, or vulnerable. For instance, if you're filming someone feeling lost or overwhelmed, a high angle shot can visually reinforce those feelings and emotions. You can easily achieve this with the DJI Pocket 3 by holding it above your subject's head or using an extension pole to get an even more extreme effect. The opposite camera angle is the low shot, and a low angle shot is when you position the camera below the subject looking up. This angle can make someone look powerful, dominant, or intimidating. It's the perfect shot for scenes where you want to show your character in a position of strength or authority. A variation of this is when you do a crane up shot where you start low at a person's feet and then raise up the camera as if using a crane or a G-bomb and end up above the head. This is a very good and interesting way to introduce a scene, a character, or a location because it looks like the kind of shot that you see in big budget movies, and all you need to do it is a monopod or a pole and it's gonna look absolutely amazing. Now, just because I'm giving you the 10 most used and popular angles doesn't mean that you can't be creative and mix things up. As a matter of fact, I would encourage you to do that because if you do what everybody else, your videos will look just like everybody else's. Next is the over-the-shoulder shot, and this is a classic shot for conversations. You place the camera behind a person in a slight angle and filming over the shoulder so that you see a bit of the person's back shoulder, but the camera is actually focusing on the person that they're talking to in front of them. These camera angle or shots make the audience feel like they're right there and part of the conversation. But one aspect that you need to bear in mind at all times with all of these shots, especially as you build the scene, is the concept of crossing the line. You want to make sure that you never cross the line in your scene because it's gonna confuse your audience. And let me explain this visually. Let's say that you want to tell the audience that you're gonna go from one location to another. You are indicating to the viewer that you are moving in that direction. The next shot is exactly the same but on a tighter angle, and again you go from left to right. But then on the third shot you appear from the right going to the left. You have now crossed the line. The audience is confused because it makes no sense that you were going left to right and then right to left. I mean, what is it? Are you coming or are you going back? So if you use any of these shots, remember that if you started the action from one side of the frame going to the other side of the frame, always follow the action using the same direction. For instance, let's imagine that you have two over-the-shoulder shots in a conversation. You start cutting from one character to the other and you know where they are in relation to the frame. One character is on the right, the other one is on the left. If you suddenly cut to a shot where the characters seem to have swapped positions and they are in the wrong side of the frame, that is confusing and distracting, and I hope that the visuals can help illustrate this because it can be a real problem if you're trying to build a scene. This is a concept that you can write a book on, and as a matter of fact, there are entire books written about this, but hopefully I've shown you the basics when it comes to content creation so that you don't have to experience this problem. The next one is the POV angle or point of view shot, and this is a great shot when you want to give the viewer the feeling that they can see what the character is seeing, putting them right there in their shoes as if they were in the thick of the action. It's great for immersive storytelling and action sequences, and with the Pocket 3, because it's so lightweight, you can mount the camera on a head strap or clip it on the side of the helmet or on a chest mount or just holding it at eye level to get a convincing POV shot. And again, the key here is to test and be creative and see whether a shot like this can actually suit the narrative for what it is that you're filming. The macro shot is a really interesting one because with this lens from Freewell, you can film details that are genuinely invisible to the human eye. These shots are fantastic for adding a sense of wonder or showing small and unique details. Imagine filming the texture of a leaf or the complex internal design of a watch or the small details of an insect. For instance, if you do product photography, getting right up close to, let's say, the lenses of a phone or similar small detail, which is something that it's impossible to get with any other lens, can be a really creative way to show some of the product features. And finally, the Dutch angle, and this is a very unusual and creative shot. And all you need to do is set the Pocket 3 in POV mode and tilt the camera to one side, creating a diagonal line. Dutch angles are perfect for showing tension or disorientation, and a variation of this shot is the inception mode or rotating 360, where the camera is spinning on a 360-degree circle, and you can then decide how much of that rotation you actually want in your edit. All I can say is that be careful with this type of shots and don't overdo it, because they can make your audience feel a bit uneasy, which is great for dramatic moments or to convey a stress or disorientation, but it's definitely not the kind of shot that is going to be suitable for most filming situations. Now, how do we put all of this together to tell a story? And the secret here is to mix and match different angles and focal lengths so that your videos will be a lot more dynamic and engaging. And on top of all of that, it's gonna help you adding a bit of pace and excitement to that scene or section of your video. Let me show you the difference by playing you a clip where I demonstrate how to add a lens to a camera, filming it all in a single shot, and then repeat the whole thing, but this time using a number of different camera angles. Which one feels better and more engaging and professional? And obviously there is a bit more love and attention put on the second clip than on the first one, but that's what happens when you start adding different angles. You get a much more dynamic and interesting scene. The secret here is not to overdo things. There is no need to go crazy and just adding shots for the sake of it. Just enough so that things flow smoothly. The problem with trying to learn all of this on YouTube is that it's disorganized. It can get repetitive, and don't get me wrong, it's possible, but it's gonna take a long time to do it. What if I was to tell you that you can cut through all of that and save yourself months and condense everything into just 14 days? That is 2 weeks where you're gonna be creating amazing looking videos for your YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, or general content creation. And if you feel a bit apprehensive about having so many different angles and shots and what to choose and what to do, don't worry. This is how I do it, and it makes me approach any filming situation really comfortable I can. Wide, mid, and close-ups. That's it. You first get your wide or ultra-wide shot to set the scene, then repeat the action and do it on a mid shot, and you finish with the close-ups. You're gonna end up with a number of different angles by recording all the same action, so it's gonna be really easy to put it together as a scene. And whether you do narrative, YouTube videos, or vertical TikToks, if you follow this sequence of shots, you're gonna be totally fine because you're covering all the basics. And then once you have all the basic shots recorded on camera, you can then focus on the more creative shots. But first, always cover the basics before you try any fancy creative shots, because they usually take a lot of time, trial and error, and you may or may not have the time to do them. There is no set rule on how to go about filming your content or scenes. Personally, this is how I always start the planning of my shortlist, and it works. Whether I'm filming a commercial, a corporate, or a YouTube video of my own, I always start my shortlist with the same structure in mind. You drop me on a film set, not shortlist of any kind, with a full crew waiting on me, and I would just tell the DP wide, mid, and close-ups with the reverse over the shoulder shots if there is any conversation, and that's it. That's the scene built. And of course, you can make things a lot more complex and intricate and have crane up shots and sweeping parallax, gimbal shots, and all of that, which is amazing if you have all of that. But that takes time And ultimately you want to get the minimum coverage, and just by using a wide, mid and close-ups, that's gonna get you covered. A lot of the times, if not most of the times, the simpler the better. Those were 10 basic camera angles to immediately improve your filming with the DJI Pocket 3. But how can we improve on this? The aim of this video is to get you shooting much more professionally, but you might ask yourself, it's all well and good to add different camera angles, but how can I get my footage to look professional? How does lighting affect the look and feel of my footage? Because lighting behaves in exactly the same way, whether you use the most expensive camera and lenses or an old VHS camera from the 80s. So first things first, why does lighting matter so much? Well, just as we can't function without light, a camera needs light to actually record an image, because without it, you just get a black frame. So understanding how it interacts with the DJI Pocket 3 and how you can shape and light a shot can actually make a massive difference on the quality of the image that you create. You can record a shot using just available light from the sun, or spend 2 hours setting up lights and create a very unique and specific look. And you're gonna get very different looks when you use one over the other. Lighting sets the mood of the shot, how someone looks on camera, or where you want your audience to look at. And this is the same whether you're filming a narrative film or a 30-second vertical TikTok. Good lighting will make a massive difference on the quality of your videos. So let's start with natural light, which is probably what most of us work with most of the time when filming with a DJI Pocket 3. How light hits your subject can completely change the feel of your frame. For example, if you are shooting during the golden hour, which is just after sunrise or before sunset, you get a really nice and soft, warm light that's really flattering on a person's face and won't give you the kind of harsh shadows that you get when the sun is high up at midday. With the sun being at a lower angle, you get longer shadows that will help you add depth to your composition. If you're shooting a wide scene like a landscape, this type of light can make everything look much more dynamic and three-dimensional. On the other hand, if you're shooting at midday or when the sun is high above your head, you're gonna get harsh shadows. And this is not necessarily a bad thing. It all depends on the mood that you're going for. If you're doing any kind of vlogging, you need to understand how lighting at different times of the day will affect the look of the footage that you're gonna get. And also whether it's a sunny day or a cloudy day. Because on a cloudy day, you have a lot more flexibility because the clouds act as a massive softbox and you hardly get any shadows that you need to be fighting against. On a cloudy day, it doesn't really matter where you position yourself or the talent in front of the camera because the light is so diffused everywhere you point the camera to. The only thing you really need to do is to make sure that you're exposed to the sky so the clouds are not too bright and then frame pretty much anywhere you want. On a sunny day, on the other hand, this is not the case and you need to decide right off the bat whether you face the sun, which is going to give you a flatter image but overall well lit. This also means that the person or people on camera will have a squint on their eyes, and this is something that you need to account for. You might decide that you don't want to have the sun featuring in the frame altogether and you want to be in the shade, and then you need to account as to whether the sun is lighting the background or not, because if you're exposed to the shadows, your highlights are gonna be too bright. So these are a lot of decisions that you need to make when you film outdoors on a bright sunny day. And this is not something that you need to worry as much when you film on a cloudy day where the lighting is soft and even everywhere you point the camera to. Filming on a bright sunny day will give you amazing looking footage if you're filming landscapes, architecture, or pretty much everything that doesn't involve a person. The moment you need to film a person or a person needs to be in the frame, you need to start accounting for the positioning of the person in relation to the sun and also what kind of lighting you have in the background. And this will have an impact on your framing and composition, because where on a cloudy day you could pretty much put the camera anywhere and record without worrying about high contrast, when filming under the sun, you do have to pay attention to this and you won't have as much flexibility. You also need to deal with harsh shadows both on the person in front of the camera and everywhere around you. And you may be tempted to put the person in the shade, let's say in the shade of a building or behind a tree. And that way you can get a nice exposure to the skin tones. If you do that and you have a brighter background, let's say buildings, street, trees, whatever, the camera will obviously be able to expose to the skin tones, but the background is going to be overexposed. This is because you are exposing to a darker part of an image, and what was already bright in the background is now even brighter with a blue sky, or even better with some clouds that will help add some depth to an image. Everything looks amazing. But the moment you need someone or yourself to talk to a camera, whether it is for vlogging or with a Pocket 3 on a tripod, you need to make a conscious decision as to whether you are okay with harsh shadows and potentially casting shadows under your eyes, what's called the raccoon effect. Or you record on a cloudy day or at a location where the lighting is even and diffused, and you don't need to worry about contrast and harsh shadows. And when it comes to indoor lighting, although the same principles apply, the challenges that you're gonna be paying attention to are very different. The Pocket 3 will give you amazing looking footage. You just have to be very aware of the type of lighting that you're filming under. It's not the same to be filming using available light shining through a window than it is filming where everything is lit using standard house bulbs or the lighting that you get on a shopping mall or similar place. You still frame and compose the shot the same way. You still pay attention to the same things. But if you use the available light through a window, yes, you're gonna be saving money from having to buy lights and accessories because the light is free of charge from the sun. But the interior will be a lot darker than the foreground because the Pocket 3 won't be able to expose to the brights while lifting the shadows to a point that the footage looks nice. Now, shadows can add depth and texture to a shot, but too much and things might start to look anything but professional, let alone good. But until you turn on the Pocket 3 and frame your shot, you'll never know. Sometimes the biggest mistakes and cock-ups in history have passed as the most creative solution. So never discard any idea just because in theory it's not gonna work. Always give it a go, and once you can see what it looks like on camera, make a decision based on your understanding of what is likely and not likely to work. If you're in a shopping mall, well, you have no control over the lighting and you need to roll with it. But these days, lighting in these places is actually okay because they try to get as much natural lighting in as possible, and then they top up with soft lighting. And the Pocket 3 will actually expose well under these conditions, and it tends to give you really nice results, but you still have to pay attention to shadows and dark areas. As you can see, understanding lighting and getting it right is a bit of a juggling exercise where you often have to find a compromise between the brights and the dark areas of an image, and then decide what you are comfortable with. Now, whether you're filming indoors or outdoors, one thing that you can do to help with your composition is to add practical lights to the frame, because that is definitely gonna help in getting the right looking footage. Things like lamps, candles, or even street lights can lift the shot and add depth to an image and help the viewer focus on what you want them to focus on. We've covered different camera angles and how to use lighting to get better looking videos, but how can we take it to the next level? This is where accessories and lenses come into play. Using ND filters in your videos and moving away from filming in auto to manual is gonna help you raise the quality of your videos exponentially.
I'm filming on full auto and everything is well exposed, and I'm taking advantage of the 1-inch sensor, so I actually have a bit of a shallow depth of field for the camera to give you this well exposed image on a bright day like today. Well, I wouldn't say it's super bright, it's very cloudy, but outdoors, the shutter speed has to be cranked up. And in doing that, any type of motion becomes really choppy. And you can see in my hands as I move, if you have any cars or anything that involves movement in the frame, everything becomes really choppy and aggressive. Now, look what happens when I add an ND filter. Now, the image in itself has not changed that much, but the movement has changed, and now you get motion blur. And this is what ND filters give you. They give you a much more natural and pleasant image to look at, much more in tune with how we perceive the world around. And this is where these freewheel ND filters come into play. The set that they sent me It's a very comprehensive set. And it's pretty much anything that you need. You get NDs from 8 to 128, and trust me when I tell you, on a bright sunny day, you are gonna need the 128, because this 1-inch sensor on the Pocket 3 allows for more light than the 1/1/3 on the Pocket 2, and on the Pocket 2 you could get away with an ND64, but on the Pocket 3 you will need the 128. Then you have the 256 and the 1000, which is great for time lapses. You get a really nice set of NDs and PL, and then you also have a promised and a light pollution filter, which is perfect for nighttime. Do you need all of them? Absolutely not. You could literally just do with the NDs, and that's probably what most people are gonna need. But if you want full control of your image, this set of NDs from Freewell is probably everything you're ever gonna need. Now, when will you use one over the other? Well, ND filters to me are an essential accessory, and they're the kind of filter that is permanently on the camera, because it's the only way to stick to the 180-degree rule and keep your shutter double your frame rate. So that's almost a must-have. But you also have this ND-PL filter that is fantastic if you do anything to do with reflections. So not just water, but buildings, windows. If you want to film through a window in a shop, or if you want to do anything that is narrative or creative through a glass or a window, these filters are amazing, and in my opinion they're almost like just as essential as the normal ND. Then you also have the ND256 and 1000, and these NDs are fantastic if you do any type of time lapses, because if you want to have those nice motion trails that you see in high-end time lapses, you're gonna need this type of NDs, because there is no way to compensate for that additional amount of light that the sensor is receiving. So in my opinion, these filters are really, really essential if you do any type of time lapses. And then you have this light pollution filter that is amazing if you film at nighttime, because a lot of the times these cameras, they have a slight tint, magenta or green, and this light pollution filter is gonna get rid of it, and it's gonna give you really nice and crispy images. And lastly, you get this Promise 1/4, and this is fantastic to recreate the bloom effect that you get on high-end lenses. Now, this camera is not a high-end camera by any means, and this lens is not what I would call a high-end lens, but it's gonna mimic this effect, and you're gonna get this bloom effect in the lights. And in my opinion, if you film at nighttime, this is an amazing filter, because all these neon lights, all these lights from the shops and through the windows, they're gonna have this sort of glow and bloom effect. And it's gonna be really, really nice. And there are a couple of things that I have to mention about the light pollution filter and the Promise. Now, the light pollution filter is a filter that is designed for filming the sky at night, or anything that is to do with the sky, or where the sky features heavily. It's not designed for normal traditional filming, because your colors are gonna be off and you're not gonna get a good effect. So always bear that in mind. And the Promise is a filter that at night you might get an effect that is too hard for your liking. Personally, I feel it's a bit too much. I wish they would also do an 1/8 rather than just a 1/4, but that's just a personal taste. But on the other hand, if you want to do some really creative and dreamy looking shots, it's a fantastic effect. Another really cool filter that comes with this set is the circular polarizer, or the CPL. And this is a filter that is brilliant for anybody that does any filming indoors. So if you are the kind of person that films in shopping malls, or you want to go to a museum and you don't want to have all those reflections on the glass, this filter is fantastic, because it's going to allow you to get rid of not all of it, but most of it. I think if you film indoors, a circular polarizer, it's almost essential, I would say.
But how can we improve things even more? How can we add more flexibility and range of shots with the Pocket 3? This is where adding different lenses will help you get an even wider range of shots and quality in your videos. Imagine how much better and professional your videos would look if you were to add an ultra-wide, anamorphic and macro lens, and have those different focal lengths as part of your range of camera angles. Because understanding this and the options available is really important to consistently create good content that looks professional. The DJI Pocket 3 has a fixed 20mm lens with an f2 aperture, which is not really the most flexible, but you can also zoom in all the way up to 40mm. And when you add the third-party lens adapters, you can get a 40mm macro, a 15mm ultra-wide, and an anamorphic lens that will give you a few more options when it comes to different angles and focal lengths. So first things first, let's talk about the basics. The DJI Pocket 3 comes standard with a 20mm lens. Traditionally, a wide-angle lens is anywhere between 15 and 20mm, so technically this is a wide-angle lens, which is great for getting more on camera of what's around you. It's ideal for vlogging, landscapes, and any situation where you want to show a lot more of the location when you're filming. And with a fixed aperture of f2, you get a consistent amount of light hitting the sensor, regardless of whether you are zooming in or zooming out, which is brilliant for low light conditions and will actually give you a fair amount of shallow depth of field. But before we move on to third-party lenses, I want to bring to your attention a very important aspect of working with different focal lengths that often goes ignored. And that is that things look different at different focal lengths, especially if you use the Pocket 3 for recording yourself or recording people. Have a look at how different my face looks when I use a 15mm ultra-wide lens and when I use a 20mm lens. And then have a look at when I zoom in all the way up to 40mm. I haven't moved an inch, the camera hasn't moved either. I've just literally changed the lens or the focal length. My face looks thinner the wider the lens and wider the longer the lens. This is also something that happens with any lens, whether it's a high-end cinema lens or the cheapest interchangeable lens. All lenses have this, you might call it distortion. So don't think for a second that this is something unique to the Pocket 3. And this is a really important aspect to keep in mind when it comes to recording your videos, because you might want a certain look over the other. Another reason is, for instance, if you're mixing footage of the Pocket 3 with another camera, let's say that you use the Pocket 3 as a B camera or C camera on a shoot, you might actually struggle to intercut a shot from the Pocket 3 in between all the shots created with a different camera if your subject's face looks totally different from one camera to the other. Now let's make things a bit more interesting, shall we? The Pocket 3 allows you to digitally zoom in up to 2 times, so you can go from a 20mm to roughly around 40mm. And to my surprise, even when you totally zoomed in, the quality of the footage is actually really good. It's not perfect, but taking into consideration that this is digital zooming is actually very good and usable. Ideally, you would want a telephoto to do this, but that doesn't seem to be possible. Now, the question is, why would you even want to zoom in? Well, apart from the obvious fact that you might want to capture things a bit closer, you might want to use the Pocket 3 to do talking heads to camera, for instance, or an interview like you would with a mirrorless camera. This will help your audience focus their attention on the message and the person that is talking, rather than having a wider field of view where you might be distracted by having a lot of things going on in the background. Always bear in mind that in general terms, 50mm is the focal length that seems to be the closest to how we see the world around us. So zooming in to 40mm will give you the closest look possible to what a person looks like in real life, which is great for when you have someone talking to a camera. This is why the viewer will always be able to relate a lot more to how a person looks on a longer lens, because they look more natural than on an ultra-wide, where our eyes and brain, even if not fully aware of it, will know that there is something slightly off because of the distortion the lens applies. Sometimes you might want a wider field of view to help you capture even more of what's around you. And that's where lens adapters come in. And I use the lenses and filters from Freewell because they're just great and they've never let me down. So let's start with the 15mm wide-angle lens. A 15mm will give you a noticeable wider field of view than a 20mm, which means that you can capture even more of what's around you. This is really useful when filming in tight spaces or when you want to capture wide landscapes or establishing shots. This lens can also be really helpful in storytelling, especially if you want to convey a sense of scale or make the viewer feel that they are in the middle of a very busy environment or location. They will help you set the scene and give your audience context about the environment or location where you're filming. The wider field of view It's also great for making tight spaces feel bigger. For example, if you're shooting anything to do with real estate or property, a wide-angle lens will make the rooms feel big and wide enough so they can actually fit within your frame. With the standard 20mm lens, you'll struggle to see half or even less. Another lens that is available for the Pocket 3 is the 40mm macro lens, and macro lenses are designed for extreme close-ups where you want to get really up close to something to capture small details. This lens can give a whole new dimension to your storytelling. Imagine filming the weird details of a flower, or the texture of a fabric, the tiny components of a mechanical watch, or the iris of the human eye. A macro lens lets you get up really close and personal, and you'll be able to see details that would be invisible to the human eye or impossible to capture with the standard lens on the Pocket 3. And you can also get very creative when it comes to product filming, because a macro lens will give you very unique shots that will show very small details of a product that you wouldn't be able to get with pretty much any other lens on the Pocket 3. And last but not least, you have the anamorphic lens adapter. And anamorphic lenses are a bit special. They give you that widescreen cinematic look by squeezing the image horizontally. It's definitely wider than the standard 20mm lens on the Pocket 3, and when you squeeze it in post, you get this beautiful wide cinematic look, and also with the traditional lens flares that you get when a light or bright spot enters the frame. This is perfect for anyone looking to give their footage a very unique and professional look. It doesn't work for everyone or for every situation. Well, as a matter of fact, it doesn't work for most situations, but if you're looking for that specific look, this lens will give you amazing results. So we've covered the type of lenses and adapters that you can use with the DJI Pocket 3. But how do these different focal lengths have an impact on your storytelling? How can you implement them in your content creation? Using these different lenses and understanding about the different focal lengths will allow you to be a lot more intentional with your shots. You'll be able to film using different angles and perspectives, which in turn is going to give your videos a much more polished and professional look. You can use these lenses to guide the viewer's attention, where they need to focus, or what in your frame is more important than anything else, or to create a very specific mood. For example, a wide-angle shot of a cityscape can make your viewer feel small and insignificant, while a close-up on a macro lens can make a boring object look charming and likable. Different lenses convey different messages. If you put in practice all the tips you've learned so far, you've already improved how you're gonna shoot videos using your Pocket 3 from this point onwards. But we're only just going through the basics so far. So let's go through more pro tips when it comes to choosing the right gimbal mode based on what you actually want to film. The Pocket 3 has several gimbal modes: follow mode, tilt locked, FPV, FPV inverted, full lock, and inception mode. Understanding these modes and how to get the best out of them will help the speed and quality of your filming and storytelling, because you'll be able to create the right visuals to illustrate your vision. And first up is the follow mode. And this is probably the mode that many people will default to. In follow mode, the gimbal keeps the horizon level, but gives you a smooth up and down tilted movement as you move or point the gimbal up or down in the direction you want it to focus on. If you tilt the camera up or down, it will follow the motion, but you don't need to worry about the roll axis because it's stabilized for you. This mode is good when you might be doing some creative shots where you start the shot pointing up or down to introduce or reveal a location or a character. This is also a good gimbal mode for getting close-up shots, because you'll be able to quickly frame your shot and then move away from it if you need to add some movement or motion to the shot. For example, if you're filming someone walking down some stairs, let's say entering the underground or the metro, where you want to film them as they go down, and then as they get to the bottom, follow them as they walk away. Using the Pocket 3 in follow mode will help you angle down the camera as the person is going down the stairs, and then easily tilt up to frame them correctly as they walk, without having to use the joystick to correct the orientation or the framing. The next mode is tilt lock, and this is the gimbal mode that I default to with my Pocket 3. And as the name suggests, this mode locks the tilt axis of the gimbal. What this means is that the camera won't tilt up or down regardless of whether you move or angle the Pocket 3 up or down. And this is great for panning shots where you don't want any vertical movement. Like when you are filming a landscape or following a moving car, for example. It's also the gimbal mode that you want to be using if you do any creative shots, like reveal shots or G-Bam type of shots, where you start at a low angle, usually behind an object of some sort, and then crane up to introduce or reveal a location or a character. For this type of shots, you can use the Pocket 3 on its own, or if you want a more extreme visual look, you can attach the Pocket 3 to a selfie stick or a monopod and get really high up. This is, in my opinion, a great combination if you want to get street furniture in your shot, like street lamps or specific features of a building. This gimbal mode is great because you can record with the Pocket 3 without having to worry about losing the horizon if you point the camera in an awkward angle. I personally prefer this gimbal mode over the follow mode, especially when I do any kind of vlogging, because I can predict the type of shot that I'm gonna be getting with the horizon level, and I don't need to worry about the gimbal pointing too high up and potentially ruining the framing because my hand is holding the Pocket 3 in a certain angle as I walk and talk. I only use follow mode when I know for sure that I will need that tilting movement, because otherwise I feel it can be distracting. But this is a very personal decision, and by no means I'm suggesting that you do exactly as I do. You might have a different preference or style of filming using a different gimbal mode. And this is just one of over 70 lessons that you can find in my DJI Beginner to Pro course. And I teach you in just 14 days everything that you need to know to create stunning and professional looking videos. And I know that it might sound too good to be true, but if you follow my program, in less than 2 weeks, you're gonna be creating amazing looking videos for your YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, or any social media platform or general content creation. And the best of it is that it's currently on a pre-sale offer that costs less than that gym membership that you never use. So if this is something interesting to you, I would love to see you inside. Click in the link below and I'll see you around. The third gimbal mode is FPV mode, and FPV stands for first person view, and in this mode the gimbal moves exactly as you move the camera. The tilt, pan and roll axes are unlocked, and you can move the gimbal in any direction that you want. This mode is great if you use the Pocket 3 as an action cam, where you want to get a sense of the point of view of the person on the bike, or in any situation where you want to get a sense of what the person is seeing. This is also a good gimbal mode if you want to introduce a sense of disorientation in your shots as you move or follow someone. And always remember that less is more when it comes to using this gimbal mode. Just don't overdo it. If you do it too much, it can actually be a bit uncomfortable to watch. On the other hand, this is a very creative mode to use for shots when you know that you're going to be doing a lot of twisting and turning. So for instance, if I was to attach the Pocket 3 to the side of a car or a bicycle, this is the gimbal mode that we usually go for, because as you turn, the gimbal turns with you in a much more natural way, much more similar to how our eyes see the world. The FPV mode will give you that sense of an adrenaline rush to your footage. The Pocket 3 also has the FPV inverted mode, and this is a very interesting mode. In this gimbal mode, you are still in FPV mode, so the tilt, roll and pan axes are unlocked, but the camera will point in the same direction that the OLED screen is pointing to. And this is great for close-up shots because you can frame and reframe very quickly. Because the lens will always point to where the OLED screen is pointing to, you can move very quickly from one point to another. It's not going to give you the handheld look because the gimbal is still engaged, but for close-ups, I find it to be the best mode because you're not having to wait for the gimbal to catch up with your movement. And one great thing about this gimbal mode over the follow mode is that if you double tap the joystick to reset the shot, it will reset the shot to where the OLED screen is pointing to. Whereas on the other hand, the follow mode, it resets to the horizontal plane, and then you have to use the joystick to get the lens in the right place, and that can be a bit of a pain. Now the lock mode, and this is not a gimbal mode in itself, it's more of a feature that the Pocket 3 gives you rather than a dedicated gimbal mode that you can set. And in this mode, the camera position stays completely locked to where the camera was originally pointing to. Regardless of how much you move, you tilt up or down or turn the Pocket 3, the gimbal is locked to that position and it won't follow any movement. And to engage it, all you need to do is just press and hold the joystick down. And unfortunately, this is not a dedicated locking mode as you have on traditional gimbals. This mode is perfect for shots when you need absolute stability, where you don't want to introduce any sideways or tilting movement and you just want the shot to be straight. And this is also a great option for handheld side review shots or grenade type of shots, because the gimbal locks onto the end frame position, and when you do the move, there are no other micro moves that can be distracting to the viewer. When I use a monopod or selfie stick to do crane up type of shots, I always prefer to use the lock mode so that the gimbal doesn't introduce any tilt or pan movement when I do the move. And this is something that happens a lot actually on this type of shots, especially if you crane up and you have the camera 6 or 7 feet up on a pole. But because this is not a mode in itself on the Pocket 3 and you can only engage it by holding and pressing down the joystick, it's impossible to do unless you find a way to clamp the joystick somehow, maybe using a small rubber band or something similar. And the last one is the inception mode or a spin mode. And this is the one gimbal mode that looks great in marketing and promotional material, but you'll probably hardly ever gonna use. In this mode, the gimbal rotates the camera on itself, giving you a very unique effect. And you can select the spinning range up to 360 degrees. This mode is great for adding drama or disorientation to a shot or a scene. You can introduce a location or a character in a different angle. It could also be used to recreate a disorientating dream. This is a mode that many people will actually never use, but if you use it, just don't overdo it, because if you use it too many times or in too many shots, it can give a bit of a headache to your audience. But for the odd shot here and there, it can actually be a really interesting and creative option. Just bear in mind that you can't switch modes halfway through a shot. Okay, so now that we understand how and when to use each of the gimbal modes on the Pocket 3, let me give you some quick tips to get the best out of the Pocket 3. And the first one is to do with white balance. Rather than trying to work out what is the right temperature and set it manually, just go and set it to auto, and immediately after that, put it back to custom. That way, the Pocket 3 adjusts to the white balance automatically, but when you put it back in custom mode, you are in manual and you're not gonna have any swings in color. And something similar applies when you film in auto. You don't want the shutter or the ISO to change as you're filming halfway through a take. Go into the exposure settings and see what is the shutter speed that the DJI Pocket 3 is adjusting automatically to. Then switch back to manual and set the shutter speed manually to the same setting that the Pocket 3 had done automatically. By doing that, your footage is gonna be correctly exposed, exactly the same as in auto, but is manually locked at the correct shutter speed, so you're not gonna have any swings in color or brightness levels. If you struggle to get the right grip because the Pocket 3 is just too small and not even adding the additional external battery handle will do, all you need to do is add some tripod fit, and that will give you a much larger area to hold on to the Pocket 3 and will also give you much more stable footage. And you can use the same setup when you do vlogging to give you a much wider field of view, because the 16mm sometimes might not be wide enough. And if you need something even wider, all you need to do is add a selfie stick, because you can extend it as far out as you wish, giving you a much wider field of view. And the Pocket 3 is so lightweight that you are actually not gonna feel any difference. If you wanna get more dynamic footage and create those really cool G-Bam shots, all you need to do is add a monopod or a selfie stick at the base of the DJI Pocket 3. And even better, if you want to monitor wirelessly what it is that you're doing, just clamp a smartphone mount at the base of either the monopod or the selfie stick, whatever it is that you use. This setup can give you amazing looking footage that you are not gonna be able to achieve with any other camera. And sticking with creating really dynamic and unique shots, you can use the DJI Pocket 3 as an action cam. And all you need to do is get yourself a chest mount, and you can mount the DJI Pocket 3 angle around 45 degrees, and it's gonna give you amazing looking footage. And even better, you can then mount the phone onto the handlebars and use the Mimo app to monitor wirelessly what it is that you're doing. If you got yourself the Creators Combo and you have the wireless mic, you can set the Pocket 3 to record both internally onto the Pocket 3 and onto the transmitter. And you can set the transmitter to record a 32-bit float audio signal, which means that you are never gonna clip the audio regardless of how loud you speak. And if you're the kind of person that prefers to have a lavalier mic hidden rather than having the microphone in plain sight, all you need to do is stick it to the color of your t-shirt or your jumper with some foamies. And believe me when I tell you, this is gonna give you the absolute best sound recording, even when it's windy.
This is a really big difference compared to the built-in microphone. And if you're gonna be talking while you're riding, this is the setup that you need, because the microphone is protected by the t-shirt. You still capture the audio, but you don't have the interferences.
And another great feature that you can do with a wireless transmitter that you cannot do with pretty much any other camera out there is that you can remotely trigger the on-off recording by just tapping once the link button. This is really cool if you happen to be recording yourself and you don't want to be walking up all the time to trigger the record button. This is gonna save you so much time and aggro. If you do any dynamic shots going from the ground up or sideways review shots, I recommend that you set the gimbal to lock mode, because when you do the movement in this mode, you don't have to worry about any sideways movements that you get when you are on pan follow or in follow mode. If you press and hold down the joystick button, you enter the lock mode and you can then do the moves and then release and go back to whatever gimbal mode that you're using. This is gonna save you a lot of time, and you can repeat the shot time and time again until you get it right, knowing that you're not gonna have any funny movement along the way. And when you do these type of shots that you go from the ground up or you do a sideways reveal, make sure that you set your focus to single and not continuous. Set the focus to the end frame, because that's what you want to be in focus, and then do the shot. Because if you leave the focus on continuous focus, which is autofocus, the Pocket 3 is gonna be hunting for focus and it's gonna do it very abruptly. Do it this way and your footage is gonna look amazing.
You can try and mimic a telephoto look on the Pocket 3 by zooming in. And if you want to increase the blur background and make it look even more similar to an 85mm, all you need to do is use the depth map and a blur background node. And because the Pocket 3 is already giving you a little bit of shallow depth of field, the effect is gonna be amazing. If you want to work faster and speed up your grading workflow, I recommend that you use lookup tables or LUTs, because they're going to allow you to grade your footage in a matter of seconds. And I have my own set of LUTs that I leave a link in the video description below, which is about 160 different looks, even with color correction LUTs that you literally just drag and drop onto your clip, depending on the type of day that you had, whether it was bright sunny day or casted shadows. And you can then create another node and drag one of the over 150 different LUTs onto your clip, and it's gonna look absolutely amazing.
When it comes to exposing your footage, always expose to the bright areas rather than the dark areas, because it's a lot easier in post to recover information from the shadows. And if you struggle, just link the Pocket 3 to the Mimo app and use the histogram, and that way you'll be able to get the right exposure time and time again. If you want to do any static shots and you don't have a tripod to put the Pocket 3 on, just lay it on a surface, even if it's inclined, and as long as the gimbal is in the clear, you're gonna get the same look as if you had it on a tripod. And you can then manually adjust the framing to your liking. If you use face tracking when you're vlogging, you may notice that your footage is actually a bit shaky and jittery. And this is because active tracking is trying to keep your face in the middle of the frame at all times. My suggestion is that you turn it off and you vlog without it. Trust me, your footage is gonna look a lot smoother and much more pleasant to the eye. If you wanna mount additional accessories onto the Pocket 3, whether that's an onboard light or an additional microphone or any other accessory, rather than try to clamp it awkwardly onto the actual Pocket 3, just get yourself a gimbal side handle and you can then mount all these accessories on it. If you want to use the Pocket 3 with the Mimo app and a smartphone so that you get a bigger screen to judge what it is that you're doing, rather than trying to find weird ways to clamp mounts onto the actual Pocket 3 and risk damaging it, just use a mini clamp mounted at the bottom of the Pocket 3 and a smartphone mount at the other end, and that way you get the best of both worlds until someone comes up with a purpose-built mount. If you are filming in auto and you are actually recording your shot but need to adjust the brightness levels, rather than stopping, adjusting, and then starting a new clip, you can just swipe the screen from the right to the left and you'll get an EV meter on the right side of the screen that you can easily adjust up and down. If you are in a situation that you don't know when you need to start recording but you need to do it as soon as possible, you can set this up easily in the menu settings so that the moment you flick that screen horizontally, the Pocket 3 turns on and start recording immediately, and it will do it using the same settings that you had before you turn it off previously. The battery handle is providing battery non-stop regardless of whether the Pocket 3 is on or off. So in my opinion, the moment you have it fully charged, unplug it, because otherwise you might find yourself that you go and pick up your Pocket 3 and it's completely flat. And lastly, if you recorded any footage, whether it's horizontal or vertical, and when you preview in your Mac, the aspect ratio is incorrect, all you need to do is hit the spacebar, and on the top right, you get the orientation, and just press it until you get the right orientation. This will correctly and save it very quickly, and you can then view it as intended. But how do you put all of this into practice using the Pocket 3, regardless of whether you vlog or create videos for social media or client work? What are the best settings and techniques to create content that looks and feels professional, even if you don't have anybody to help you?
The DJI Pocket 3 is an amazing little camera, but how do you get the best out of it? I've been filming with it for over a year since it came out, and these are the best settings that I have found to get the most amazing footage from it. And the first thing is to shoot at 4K. And yes, the camera gives you the ability to shoot at 1080p, 2.7K and 4K. You want 4K because 4K is going to give you the flexibility that you can reframe your shots. And for instance, you can turn a boring shot like this one that is static into a more interesting and engaging by just adding a bit of a tracking in post. Trust me, you want to start with the highest possible quality from the word go. And the next thing to do is to choose very carefully your frame rate, because the DJI Pocket 3 gives you the ability to go from 24 to 60 frames per second at 4K. But the look and feel of 24 is very different than a 60 frames per second. And 60 frames per second gives you the ability to do a slow-mo at 4K filming on D-Log with autofocus, which is something that you cannot do at 24 frames per second. Now, I'm not trying to tell you that you have to shoot at 25 frames per second or at 24 frames per second, because that's a decision that you have to make for yourself. But you should spend a little bit of time trying to understand why you choose one frame rate over the other. And the same applies to considering a slow motion, okay? Because even if you have a small jittery movements, you can slow it down from 60 to 24 and get some really amazing looking footage. And you can take this even further by taking advantage of the slow-mo features on this camera, which gives you the ability of shooting 125 frames per second at 4K 10-bit D-Log M, which is fantastic, or 240 frames per second at 1080p. And although it's locked at the normal color profile, you still get amazing quality that you can then upscale, and the footage is going to look absolutely amazing. And to make sure that all works together, you want to make sure that you use manual settings at all times over auto, because auto settings means that the camera decides what's the right setting for you rather than you deciding what's the right setting. All you need to do is to set your shutter speed at double your frame rate and have the ISO as low as possible. And to do that, you're going to have to use ND filters, because the 20mm lens on the Pocket 3 is a fixed aperture. There is nothing you can do about it. It's fixed at f2, which is great because it's going to give you a fair amount of shallow depth of field or blur background. And what that means is that unless you use ND filters, there is absolutely no way that you're going to be able to expose correctly with this camera. And let me illustrate why that is. At the moment I'm filming at 25 frames per second, my shutter is at 50 and my ISO is 200, okay? Now, look what happens when I remove the ND filter. Everything is overblown, and I would then have to go on auto for this to adjust. But when I put the ND filter back on, everything looks fine and I get motion blur. And that's the big deal here, okay? Motion blur. Because when you shoot on auto, yes, the camera is going to expose correctly, but the shutter is going to be so high that there is absolutely no motion blur whatsoever, and it just looks horrible. It looks digital, and that's not what you want. You want to make sure that you stick to the 180-degree rule, use ND filters, and you get motion blur, and that's gonna give you the best image quality. And to get the right exposure, you may as well turn on the Mimo app and use the histogram, because that's going to allow you to have a visual representation of how well or badly your image is exposed. And on that note, use the Mimo app as much as possible, because you're going to get a much bigger screen, especially if you are outdoors, because it's going to allow you to actually see more, because the phone is a much larger screen. And I use this smartphone adapter that allows me to clamp the phone right next to the Pocket 3, and that allows me to control the Pocket 3 both through the Pocket 3 screen and the smartphone, because some of the features and settings you cannot do on the Mimo app, but you can on the Pocket 3. And that in itself is going to help you to get the best image quality out of this amazing little camera. And if you want to know more about the DJI Pocket 3 and how to use it well and how to get the best possible results out of it, I have a fully dedicated course where I teach you how to get the best out of this camera in 14 days. And I don't teach you just how to use this camera, but about lighting, framing, composition, sound, everything that you need to use this camera for social media, content creation, corporate real estate, and so many different areas where this camera, in my opinion, is the best camera around. So if this is something interesting to you, click on the link in the video description. It's actually a shame that the DJI Pocket 3 only has a fixed 20mm lens, because it would be really amazing if we would have the ability to zoom in onto a telephoto range. But you can digitally zoom in, and the quality is actually not bad. So for instance, now I'm zoomed in at 1.5 times, okay? And you can go up to 2 times, which is the equivalent to a 40mm lens. It's not as good as when you are full wide at 20mm, but it's definitely usable. And I know that the temptation is to say, well, I'm gonna film at 20mm and then punching in post, but you need to understand about lens distortion, and it's not the same the way you look at 20mm than the way you do at 40mm. And this has to do with optics and the way lenses behave, and it's the same whether you use the lens on the DJI Pocket 3 or an interchangeable zoom lens. Because let's not forget that the image quality that you get out of the DJI Pocket 3 is phenomenal, taking in consideration how tiny this camera is. And DJI gives you 3 different color spaces, D-Log, normal, and HLG, and neither one of them is better than the other one. They're all different for different situations. So for instance, D-Log is the one that most people will use in most situations because you get some really nice footage, but the normal color space is also a very good color profile. If you're gonna be in a very high contrast situation, you're gonna be backlit, or you're gonna be moving from a very dark area to a very bright. That's actually a very good color space. And 2 big settings to always bear in mind, one for video and one for sound. When it comes to video, make sure that you always white balance this camera. Now, it's gonna be impossible for you to know what is the right color temperature. So my advice is go to the white balance. For instance, in this situation, turn it to auto, wait for 2 or 3 seconds, and then turn it back to custom. The camera is going to automatically adjust to the correct white balance, but then when you turn it to custom, it's locked and it's not gonna change and give you a shift in color temperature halfway through a shot, which it would happen if you are in auto. And when it comes to sound, make sure that you set the DJI microphone to 32-bit float, because a 32-bit float signal is gonna give you a huge range that pretty much means that you are never gonna clip the sound. And that is huge, because if there is one thing that you want to make sure that you get right, it's the sound, because your audience will be a lot more forgiving to bad quality video than they are to bad quality sound. And when it comes to focus, you want to make sure that you are on autofocus most of the time, but just be careful because it's not perfect. I mean, even autofocus is not perfect by itself, but if you want to do any creative shots, like for instance, crane up shots using a monopod or a selfie stick, or reveal shots where you pan across from behind an object to reveal a location, you want to be on manual and lock the focus to the end frame and then do the movement. And that way you know that your end shot or your end frame is going to be in focus, because this camera has a tendency to do focus hunting and it's too abrupt and it's going to throw you off. And it goes without saying that this is a camera and a gimbal, so movement is a very important feature with this camera. But my advice is that you don't overdo it. Just because this is a gimbal and a camera doesn't mean that you have to go crazy. Small moves, short intervals, don't go crazy unless you do city walks or that type of filming. Keep it slow, pace yourself, and then your footage is going to look absolutely amazing. Use a tripod when you do talking head shots like this one, or any type of a static shot, because it's going to give you the stability that your arm is not going to give. And don't disregard using a monopod for creative shots like crane up or G-bomb shots, or even better, a selfie stick for when you do vlogging, or if you are in a very busy environment where putting a tripod on the ground is pretty much impossible. And one of the things that you can do is to use one of these gimbal fit or mini tripods and attach it to the Pocket 3, and that's gonna give you an additional grip point, and believe me when I tell you, it does make a big difference. One of the things that I like to use the DJI Pocket 3 is as an action camera with a chest mount, and you can get amazing looking footage because you can use ND filters, which is not something that you can use with an actual action cam because they rely heavily on digital stabilization. And the moment you put an ND filter, the stabilization goes out the window. With the DJI Pocket 3, that's not a problem because this is mechanical stabilization. So you just need to make sure that you set the gimbal to either tilt lock or FPV, and the speed to either normal or slow, and you run your own tests, because what might be good for me might not necessarily be good for you. But that's gonna give you amazing looking footage. And when it comes to tracking, which is what I'm doing now with the DJI Pocket 3, I recommend that if you do vlogging, you don't use active tracking, okay? Because it's just gonna be too messy and you're gonna get headaches because the camera reacts too quickly. It's just a mess. It's best that you hold the camera and you move the arm as you turn. Now, obviously, if you're in a situation where you move very fast, or for instance, you're trekking up a mountain and you can't, keep a steady hand, then obviously active tracking is okay. What I recommend is that you use dynamic tracking over active tracking, because that's gonna allow you to select where in the frame you want to be tracked. And that's gonna give you a huge flexibility because you can select to be in the middle and not too much headroom, or you can select to be on the right or the left side of the frame. If, for instance, you have a shot where you start on the left and you walk to the right, or vice versa, the camera can track you in that way, and that way framing a composition looks good. And this is, in a nutshell, the best settings that I use to film with the DJI Pocket 3. And I use the DJI Pocket 3 more these days than I use any of my mirrorless cameras, for the simple fact that is such a tiny and efficient camera to use.
If you have made it this far, you now have all the knowledge that you need to go out and shoot professional looking videos using your DJI Pocket 3. If you found this video useful, do let me know by giving it the old thumbs up. And if you'd like to learn more about shooting cinematic videos using your Pocket 3, then make sure to check out my DJI Pocket 3 course in the description below. Over 60 lessons that will transform you into a professional content creator filming with the Pocket 3 in less than 2 weeks. And that's it from me. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.